Well, you know, one of the things, of course, we heard about Jeannie was the resilience learned from her parents' experiences. Now, we're going to focus a little more on developing those resilient skills as a hallmark of leadership. And we're looking forward to hearing from Roxanne Derhodge. Now, she's a mental health and wellness specialist based in Niagara Falls. She's a registered psychotherapist specializing in individual, couples, and family therapy with over 20 years of experience. She's a graduate of the University of Toronto and the University of Guelph, specializing in cognitive, behavioral, and family systems therapy. She was an executive with the largest health and wellness firms in North America for 15 years and has really put that experience and expertise to use to assist companies with their own corporate strategies in health and wellness. And thankfully, companies now are thinking about that. She has a best-selling book, which she has had here, and she says when leaders start to focus on ROI, return on relationships is what will help the ROI take care of itself. So let us welcome Roxanne Derhodge.
I said, what a privilege it is to follow Jeannie Becker. I came to Canada in 1983 from a little town of country of Trinidad and Tobago, and I remember she was one of the first Canadians that I followed on TV. So one thing that she said that I think is so relevant to what I'm going to talk about today is chutzpah. Because when we think about what we've gone through in the last 2 years, I would say that most of the women in this room and men, if there are a couple, we've had to have chutzpah. So I'm going to talk today about getting knocked down and getting back up again and doing it as gracefully as you can. So it was 2009, November. It was unseasonably warm for a November, and the reason I remember that day, favorite suit on, black light suit that I could actually wear. Looking up at the sky, I felt the sunlight on my face, and it brought me back to being a little girl in Trinidad and Tobago. Feeling that sun on my face just brought me back to a nice space. It was a good day. As a corporate health and wellness consultant, I dealt with a lot of companies, and that particular day, I had just attended a meeting, and this client was having a lot of issues. Not a good run with the company that I was with, but this day was a good day. So walking out of the meeting, it was successful. Not too much stress, not that day anyway. So I was feeling pretty good. A tang in my hand, nothing else. And I'm thinking, what a beautiful day. Good meeting, beautiful day. As I'm walking along, I can hear the bustle of the city, which I love. Smell the falafels and hear all the honking horns. And I'm walking on. Okay.
This one?
Yeah. All right. Keep that. Yeah. Sorry about that. So I'm walking along, just unaware, just kind of taking everything in like you do in Toronto. And coming towards me was a young man. Without my heels, I'm approximately 5'1". He was, I think, about 6'2". He had a white hoodie, and that's about all I can remember. He was mumbling, apparently, and saying some things under his breath. And as he apparently approached me, that was the last thing I remembered. I was knocked out by this complete stranger. So, sitting on my back, that's all I remember, looking up at the beautiful sky yet again. There was another young man with the most amazing pool blue eyes I can remember. He took his jacket off, rolled it up really nice, and put it under my head. So I thought, oh, this is interesting. And then he said something that still to this day sends a chill down my spine. He said to me, everything is gonna be okay. In that moment, I realized I was an imposter and that things had to change. So today, I'm going to tell you that I was willfully unaware. I was not aware. I looked the part, probably not unlike what I look like today. I had the career that most people at my age would probably think, what a privilege. I had a beautiful son and 25 years of marriage. I thought I was doing pretty good. In that willful unawareness, I stopped. And I realized then that change was necessary. So today, I'm going to talk to you about relationships, starting with relationships with herself. Because in life, we need to be aware in order to be able to connect with others. So this concept of ROR, which is based on my book, and I tell you you're a privileged bunch because of Iris Meck. This book has not been released. I just brought them here today so I can ensure that Iris's crowd could have a peek at it. We're going to talk about relationships and the fact that us being connected to ourselves is the best gift that we can give ourselves as leaders. So the ROR concept is based on 5 areas. And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to do something a little bit fun for you today. So the first level is awareness, which I won't get much into, because we're going to talk about that in my talk today. The second is balanced processing, which is basically biases. I don't know how many people in this room have biases, and what we do with biases in reference to decisions. And then we're going to talk about relational transparency. What is it that I let you see that you can connect with me? Connection. We all want to connect, don't we? I know I do, right? So I'm looking for somebody to look at so I can connect. And recognition. As leaders in whatever realm, what do you do to recognize people in the way they want to? How do you give the kudos in the way that says, I got you. I see what you're doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a fun bit because I want you to get a snapshot of what are the things that block you from authenticity. So I've developed an assessment, and we are going to go through this assessment so you can see What are the things that block you from getting connected in relationships? So these are the areas that we're going to have questions on each one. So I'm going to assume all of you lovely ladies have a phone with you. Pull them out. And I'm going to assume some of you have done a Slido assessment before. So what we're going to do is we're going to start it now. It says 30 seconds per question, but we're going to make it a minute because I want people to have the time to be able to answer the questions. Okay, so what we're going to do is you're going to have the ability to input the number per section, and we can start the Slido now. So here's your first question. Are you approachable during a crisis with your team? Here's the results. 53% of you said that you are approachable during a crisis. Okay, we can go on to the next question. Let's kind of see our results now. And 41, 35, you're able to focus on your attention exclusively on the team members. So you're doing pretty good. Okay, we can go to the next question. Do I make good decisions regardless of the pressures surrounding the situation? Again, 49%, you'd say you do make good decisions regardless of the pressure. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Do I relate well to personalities that are different from mine? And how well do you relate to personalities different than yours? That seems to be an area that maybe people struggle with a little bit more. But there's overall 36% that are kind of in the middle. So maybe diametrically opposed relationships is maybe a higher authenticity blocker. We'll go on to the last one. And the last question is, it seems that, again, most of you are quite familiar with your teammates. So this gives you a snapshot of what's in the room, and it seems to be that potentially one of the highest authenticity blockers that you might have is when people are a bit different from you. So what we're going to talk a little bit about is basically what are some of the things that you need to understand. Today, what we know around about post-traumatic growth, we often talk about stress and not the positive things to stress. But I'd like to talk a little bit more about what you can actually do to deal with stressors in a positive way. So what we know based on stats from 2021, that almost 42% of women in 2021 are actually burnt out or teetering on burnout. So that's basically close to 1 in 2. So think about that. So when you're thinking about what is it that I can do for myself as a leader in whatever realm, and I often say we lead from the time we open our eyes, what is it that you can do to take care of yourself? So today we can only talk about one of the levels of the authenticity quotient, which is awareness. So there are 3 levels of awareness that I would like you to consider. And the first is self-awareness. So I'd like to tell you about someone that's quite amazing. She was somebody that knew herself and was quite aware, and she's a leader actually out east in an IT company. Her name was Shelley Butler, and she was raised by a single mom. So what do single moms do? They're busy, they're tenacious, they're juggling a lot of things. So she learned the value of hard work very, very early from her mom. When she started in the computer world, it was a very top-down kind of business. She was flowing against the stream because she was very transformative and collaborative. She led shoulder to shoulder with her teammates. And what happened to her in that space is that she became noticed, not because she was going along with the normative kind of practices, but she got noticed because she was collaborative. She was pushed and pulled, but she stayed connected to her style of leading shoulder to shoulder. She created a space at this company, which she eventually rose to be the CEO at, by saying, I lead and am a leader because I look for leadership within each person that I take care of. One day, one of her colleagues on her team came to her direct reports, and said, you know, I just got this frantic call from this customer. You know what they said? They want to speak to the VP of sales. And Shelley goes, well, that's good. Do you know what you're doing? She said to the employee. They said, absolutely, I do. She said, well, today, what I'd like you to do is to give yourself that whatever title you need to deal with that employee, with that customer. Needless to say, the employee went back, was able to close the deal, and Shelley demonstrated that when you're a leader that tries to find the capacities in those around you, you allow them to see their capacities and grow from there. Shelley is a good example of someone that did not change her leadership style. So what is it that we generally see in leadership? Very autocratic, top-down, and expectations that we act in a certain way. As women, are you collaborative? What kind of environments are you working in? And what are some of the pressures? Can anybody share with me some of the pressures that you may have to go against the grain and get away from your personality? Anybody willing to share? Well, sometimes in male environments, what happens to females, and you can probably share more with me, is that we quiet that space within ourselves. But in this case, what Shelley did was she showed her true self. She understood her self-awareness of what she wanted to be perceived as a leader. And with that, she has excelled. So my question becomes to you, how do you listen to what you need within yourself to be aware of your leadership style? So that's the first level of awareness. The second level of awareness is connection to others. So it was 1992, and I was a young grad. I was on my way to the hospital for an interview to run a unit. As I entered the hospital, those gray walls made my tummy feel awfully heavy, and I could feel my heart pulsating as I entered the reception area. As I entered, trying to kind of hear my thoughts above my heartbeat, I could hear a lot of murmuring in the distance. I thought, well, that's odd, isn't it? Later, I was to find out that that chatter was about me. I was one of the many leaders that was the new one that was going to be brought up to slaughter. And the decision was to be made about how long I would last if I got the job. Needless to say, I got the job. And this was a team that had leaders that they would chew up and spit out, quite literally, day in, day out. Not quite literally, but month after month. So at our meetings, it was like a snipe session. Who was going to take who out? Who was going to get the better job? Who was going to put down who? And who was going to have conflict with who? It was a toxic spot and difficult at best. I knew that I needed to do something as the new leader. What did I do? Well, I tried, and I often pictured them having pictures of me in their basement with poison darts playing with the, who was going to get the bullseye on my face. There was a situation that happened, and I can tell you, I had 10 staff, and according to our presenter earlier, I think all of them were on that continuum of that ocean, and I think I was running around trying to figure out which part to kind of address at any given point. So they were running me ragged often. But what I realized is they needed a leader. And guess what? I'm not a quitter. I may be new, but I'm not going to quit. So what happened was, one day Jim, who was, I think, literally over 6'5", comes stomping into my office and he says, "Oh my God, she's done it again. She's just fired me yet again." He had had a run-in with the CEO. And let's put it this way, Jim was very expressive. And finally, she had said she'd had enough. When he came into my office on the unit, I had to calm him down. I said to him, "Let's talk. This must be tough." I spent time with him and just really listened to what he had to say. What I didn't realize was I was on stage that day, but nobody told me that I was going to be on stage. Because of my ability to show safety, security, and consistency and fairness in dealing with him, it spread like wildfire. I'm not telling you this happened overnight, but what it took was me being safe, consistent throughout that unit. And what started to happen was they started to gel as a team because they thought she's fair. She's maybe not like the rest of them. Why don't we give her a bit of a chance? Then they started to take care of projects. There was less conflict, and a bit at a time, along with repetition, what started to happen is they started to gel as a unit. So 6 years later, after you leaving that unit, they were a self-functioning team. They were able to run that unit, and I was consulting about 2 days a week with them. So I'm here to pose a question to you to say, what happens when you're safe and consistent with people is that eventually they start to need you less. And I wonder what would happen to you in your positions if people realized that you were going to be consistent and safe. They're going to come to you less about nitpicky things, and the blame game's not going to have a place to land. You're going to have a lot more time, a bit less stress, and you're probably going to get a little bit more done. So I'd like you to think about that in your perspective about where you live and who you impact. How is it that you are creating a space of safety and security? Who am I? How am I showing up? And what am I demonstrating? And if you're not, starting to think about what you can do. So I'd like you to tell you about this guy, and he speaks to the last level of awareness. Some of you may know him, some of you may not know him, but he's a pretty inspiring guy. His name's David Price. And this is a guy, young man, I should say, that lives in integrity. In 2015, he was going for a walk with one of his best friends in Seattle. Her name is Valerie. And Valerie said to him, you know, he owned a company called Gravity, which is an IT company. And she said she was complaining on their hike, like sometimes we often do when we go out with our friends. She said, you know, they just hiked my rent yet again. It's tough to live in Seattle on $40,000 a year. Now, David Price had a $1 million business. He had a couple of homes, and probably a lot more investments than we can remember, he can remember. He didn't want to be like every other philanthropist that donated to hospitals or charities. What he wanted to do was to make a difference. And he had two things he valued. He had Christian values, and he had humanitarian values, in that he wanted to make a difference in his own backyard. What he did was, he did something kind of extreme. He said, you know, I'm going to find out how I can deal with this disparity in income. I'm going to give you a statistic, which blew my mind when I found it, that in the 1960s, the parity between employees and CEOs, there was such a big disparity. In 1965, CEOs were making 20 times what their employees made. In 2015, it had rose to 200 times. Imagine that. He said, no, I'm not going to do that. So he did a research project, looked into things. And what he found out is that the average American got happy when they made about $70,000. So guess what he did? He went back to his team and he says, guess what? I'm going to make a difference right here. Well, you can imagine the pushback that he got. Are you crazy? That's going to affect our bottom line. There's no way. We can't do this. And he goes, I don't care. I'm going to live in my legacy of knowing that I made a difference. So he instituted the $70,000 a year. You know what happened to his business? And if anybody knows the story, you've heard it before. His employee base tripled. His billion-dollar business went, the numbers are $3.8 billion to $10.2 billion. And guess where all the best employees wanted to work? And guess where those employees tell everybody else that they should work? So he made the difference. So he's an example of someone that's living his integrity on that level of awareness. And I want you to think about it. In your leadership legacy, what is the imprint that you'd like to leave behind? So those are the 3 levels of awareness. And what I'd like to do is there's a QR code here. I'm going to offer you, if you go to that, you'll get a download of first chapter of my book. So I hope you enjoy it. And there's also a course associated with it if you'd like to learn skills. But I'd like to take you back to my story, because I'm sure you're curious, right? You're like, oh my God, she got knocked out. What happened? So, so I got knocked out. Remember, like I said, I was unaware. So what happened was, it wasn't pretty. I know I have full lips, but I looked like Angelina Jolie after I was knocked out. Puffy lips. My teeth had to be realigned. And I'm like, well, I didn't have nice teeth to begin with, but it was pretty bad. I had cluster headaches. I've never had headaches. I had cluster headaches to the point where I could barely focus for more than an hour and a half at a time. As my body recovered from that trauma, I started to listen. And what I realized was that I needed to start to listen. So there were several reasons that I didn't listen. And you're thinking, what are they? So I'm a leader, right? I've got the job, I've got the status, I've got the beautiful son, I've got the 25 years of marriage. So the first thing I did when I healed is I went back to my employer and I said, guess what? I'm overworked, underpaid, and I can't do this anymore. And you know how that went. Not so well. But I was offered a severance package, so I quickly took it, and off I went. Next, I ended my 25-year marriage. I kept that marriage together because I didn't want my little 8-year-old son to grow up in a broken home. What I didn't realize was, and this is when I realized this was the best decision of my life. So I remember saying to my son, his name is RJ, and I said, so RJ, Mommy has something to tell you. And he goes, what's that, Mommy? And I said, well, Daddy and I are going to separate. And he said, it's okay, Mommy. I listen to you. I listen to you, your crying and sometimes your sad voices as I go to bed. So what did I miss? I needed him. Here I am trying to protect him. But what I needed him to see is that I could take care of myself first. And that's what I did. That day, the imposter in me died. I became authentically connected to myself. So I'd like you to think about this. So I was knocked out quite literally by a stranger that made me make changes in my life. This concept of a knockout is not just about me. Knockouts can take many forms. We could take a death in a family, a separation, a new job, or an overbearing boss. Anybody have one of those or have had one of those? So I'd like you to think. As you think through the things that I've shared with you today, with the amazing time that we've spent together, and I can tell you, you are powerful women with so many things to be done in this world, and to lead in an industry that is completely in a space and base from grassroots, male-oriented. What I'd like you to think about is, as we go home today, this afternoon, I'd like you to think, how is it that you're connected to yourself? Are you aware? What do you need to do to check in to whether you're connected to others in your life? stop and really, maybe not now because you're tired and you need to go home and relax. But when you have that downtime, I'd like you to reflect on that. And last but not least, as I think of my little boy, who is an amazing young man today, what will be your social legacy or imprint in your leadership? I want you to ask yourself those questions. And when you do, it'll knock the imposter right out of you if you have issues in those areas. And when you do, what you will find is the space for your return on your relationships. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Roxanne, for those thought-provoking items that we can take home and work on. I've got the mics open right now, so if you have any questions about how more to do this in your own leadership styles or in your own day-to-day living, we'll open that up and you can come forward and ask your questions. Be bold. So, now, Roxanne, you do have a lot of this in a book, right? You've got your
Yes, the book's out there. So if you want to pop by, and there is on the tables there is the QR code. It's not this one. It's this one up here, but it's little cards that you can just, if you just want to chat and you want to run something by, just connect with me on my website. I'm more than happy to chat with anybody from AWC.
All right. Well, with that, thank you very much for sharing with us today, Roxanne, and we look forward to hearing from you again in the future. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Roxanne Derhodge, based in Niagara Falls, Ontario,